Welcome everyone to month 2 of Janome's UpWords Block of the Month Quilt Along. I'm Kimberly Einmo, Janome's national spokesperson, and I'm thrilled to welcome you back to my studio for month 2 because this month we're going to be focusing on making these beautiful woven hearts blocks. Now we're going to be using our best piecing to make these blocks, and I'm going to go over everything you're going to need. So join me at the cutting table where we'll discuss what you're going to need to cut, and then we're going to get right to sewing. Let's go over everything you're going to need in order to make these 3 beautiful woven hearts blocks. Now the first thing you'll need is your handouts because it's got everything listed that you'll need to cut for the 3 different variations of the woven hearts blocks. And the other thing you're going to need 2 rulers this month. You will need a regular rotary cutting ruler that has the 1/8 inch increments on it. This is the one time we're going to be cutting increments that end in 8ths or 3/8 or 5/8, and you're going to need a regular rotary cutting ruler. We're also going to be using the Precision Pre-Cuts ruler, and I'm going to show you how to get perfectly cut triangles from squares with this 45-degree line on the ruler. You'll need your rotary cutter, keep that handy, and if you have a smaller rotary cutting mat, I recommend having this available because I'll show you why it makes cutting those squares into triangles so much easier. Let's also go over what you're going to need. We're going to need some rectangles from 3 fabrics, and it's all listed on your cutting chart. Those rectangles are 10 1/4 by 2 3/8, and you're going to need 3 different color combinations. I've got them laid out here, and that matches exactly what's on your handouts. And we need some of the little smaller rectangles that are 4 3/8 by 2 3/8. So once you get all the rectangles cut, then we're going to need some of those triangles. You're going to need some triangles that are cut from 3 5/8 inch squares, some triangles from the 6 3/4 inch squares, and some from the 6 3/8 inch squares. So I'm going to show you a neat trick for how to cut those from all of your squares. Come join me. Cut your background fabric squares exactly as they're listed on your pattern, on the handout. Now, you're going to want to label each of those squares and how many times we have to cut them diagonally. Look at this. We're going to have 3 3 5/8 inch squares, and those will be cut 1 time diagonally. And I've labeled that as my A patches. My B patches are 3 squares that are 6 3/8 inches square, and we're going to cut those 1 time diagonally. We also have 1 6 3/4 inch square, but we're going to be cutting this 2 times diagonally. So let me show you a great trick for making sure that when we cut these diagonally, we are getting very accurate cuts. This is where I like to use the smaller rotary mat if you happen to have one handy. Now we're going to use the Precision Pre-Cuts ruler. This is your 10 1/2 inch square ruler, and it has one and only one diagonal line on the ruler. That is your 45-degree line. It even says that up here in the corner. It says 45 degrees, so you'll know this is the one and only diagonal line on the ruler. We're going to use that diagonal line at the bottom of this square, and we're going to go corner to corner. We're going to lay that 45-degree line down right at the bottom of your 3 squares, and we're going to put it corner here, which puts it automatically at the opposite corner up here. We're going to hold the ruler in place, and now we're going to cut, and this is going to give us equal triangles. And it's a perfect, perfect cut. Now we have our A patches cut. Let's label those again so we don't get them confused. And we're going to bring in the B patches or the B squares. And again, here we go. We have 3 squares all aligned. These are 6 3/8 inch squares. We're going to take that 45-degree line, put it along the bottom of the squares, and that makes it go corner to corner so we can cut accurately across these rather large squares and get accurate triangles. These are the B patches. And now you can put your little sticky note right back on them and set those aside. Finally, we're going to use the 6 3/4 inch square that's going to become our C patches. Now this is our largest square, but we're going to cut it 2 times diagonally. So we're going to lay the Precision Pre-Cuts ruler on the bottom of the square, going corner to corner. And now we're ready to cut. But this is especially why I like the smaller rotary cutting mat. Because I'm not going to move the fabric now. I'm going to actually rotate the mat 90 degrees. And now I'm going to lay the ruler back down on top of the square. And we're going to go corner to corner. And we're going to make the second cut. So this one square was cut 2 times diagonally. And now we have 4 triangles, but we only need 3 triangles for these 3 blocks because we only use 1 C patch in the blocks. So now we're ready to label these and stack up all of our A and B patches, and we're going to move into the sewing room and we're going to set up our machine and get ready to do some fast and fun piecing. This is an easy block to piece. When you are ready to start, make sure you've got your machine set up for your perfect scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm using my favorite HP foot and plate system on my Continental M8. Make sure that if you have that option, use the HP foot and plate or use your favorite 1/4 inch seam foot. Your presser foot, whatever is your favorite, the O foot with a guide, whichever one, make sure you have it set up. And that your seam or stitch length is about 2.4 or 2.5. You don't want a tiny little stitch length because the smaller the stitches, the more it draws the fabric in, and we don't want that. We're going to start with our D patches, and this is all listed on your handout. Your long rectangles are your D patches, and you can see those here. And we have our E patches, which are the smaller rectangles. We're going to start by sewing our D patches together, and then we're going to sew our E patches together. And we'll go ahead and do that right now, and then we'll press. Be sure and put your rectangles right sides together and align the raw edges, and then it's time to stitch. Your units will look like this after they've been stitched together, and I recommend going ahead and chain piecing all of your units at one time. Then we can move to the iron and get them all pressed at once. Now it's time to press the seams. And for each of the units, we're going to be pressing the seams toward the center rectangle. And it's really easy to do. The first thing we want to do is just kind of align it so that we are pressing toward the center. And bring your iron in there and give it a good press and maybe a shot of steam, or you can spritz it with some water or your sizing or best press. And again, we're just trying to get that iron in there, pressing the seams toward the center rectangle. So we have a nice, beautiful, flat unit. We want to make sure there are no tucks or puckers in here. Make sure it's nice and flat. One more quick press. That's beautiful. Now we're going to do it on all the others. Let's do one more here. Get that nice and pressed towards the center rectangle. And make sure that you get it in there so you don't have any puckers. So give it a good shot. And here we go. We've got those pressed. I'm going to finish pressing the rest of mine. You press yours, and then we're going to meet back at the sewing machine to start adding our triangles. Now it's time to add our A and C triangles. You're going to want to start with your triple E unit, and you can see that right here. And all of this is spelled out in your pattern, in your handouts. We have our triple E rectangle unit, and we're going to take our A triangle and we're going to line it up so that we have raw edges together here on the right end of the triple E rectangle unit, but we need to have a little bit of the dog ear sticking off the end, a little bit here, and that's 1/4 inch. You're going to have to eyeball it or kind of learn to measure where your seam will come out, and that's about 1/4 inch extending beyond the raw edge of the triple E rectangle unit. Now we're going to sew this down, starting down here, and we're going to put the presser foot down and sew, making sure that those seams underneath don't get flipped around. And now we're going to go right off the edge. There we go. That's beautiful. So that's how we add the A triangle. Now we would take this and go to the iron and press it, because we want to press the seam away from the triple E rectangle unit. And I've already done one here, and I've already pressed it flat. Now we can add our C triangle, and you can see here how the C triangle is going to be added. And we're going to align the raw edges of our C triangle with the rectangle unit. I've aligned them on 2 sides, and now we're going to stitch this down using our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Perfect. What this does is this is forming the center of our heart, but it gives us a beautiful 1/4 inch seam allowance left over. Here we go. Do you see how we have a 1/4 inch seam allowance left over? Now we'll be trimming off those dog ears later, but we're going to go ahead and press this seam towards the C triangle. Do that on all 3 of your triple E rectangle units. Add the A, then the C, and then we'll come back and talk about what we do with the D units. I've finished all the A and C triangles on the E units, and I've pressed all the seams away from the E units out towards the background triangles. So you'll have 3 of those E units, and everything should be pressed and ready to go. Now we need to add the A triangles to the D units. So get your D units, which are your long rectangle units, and we're going to be adding the A triangle to the top side of the top left side of the D unit. Now what do I mean by that? Be sure to refer to your handout because I have a really good illustration there. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding the A triangle right here. And we're going to, again, line it up, staggering it just a little bit so that we can have that little dog ear, that little 1/4 inch seam allowance sticking out beyond the D unit. Now we're ready to sew across here. And we're going to go ahead and line that up, line the raw edges up, and now we're going to stitch. There you go. That's all there is to it. And again, we're going to be pressing the seam toward the background fabric A patch or the background fabric triangle. So do that on all of your D units, and then we're going to put them together. All right, now it's time to press our A triangles away from the triple D units. Sounds like a ranch somewhere, triple D. But we want to go ahead and press that. And some of you may be wondering why I'm not setting my iron up on the side. That's because these Aliso irons are amazing. They actually lift themselves up every time your hand is not on it. It knows not to leave it flat so we're not scorching or causing a fire hazard with my pressing surface. But I really love that about these irons. So let's go ahead and just give this a good press here. See, it just raises right up. I love that. And the last one. Okay, let's go back to the sewing machine and add these to our E unit. You're probably thinking that these units look a little strange, and they actually do, but they really will come together to make a fun little heart. So what we need to do is add the E unit to the D unit, and that's fairly easy to do because we are just going to line up the raw edges of the E unit and the D unit and align this nice long edge, and that comes out perfectly up here where we have a little overlap there, and that's where our 1/4 inch seam allowance is. So we'll be coming right out there at that little apex or that intersection, but we're going to start stitching from down here at the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and sew along here, making sure to keep the raw edges aligned nicely. Don't let that seam flip over, otherwise it'll be lumpy and bumpy. And we're going to come right out here. Perfect. We did it. Now, when we get ready to press the seam here, you can see that we still have our nice 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top of the heart. So go ahead and add your E units to your D units, and then we'll add the final triangles to create this block. You want to give this last seam where we joined the E and D patches together a good pressed close first, you know, to set the seam. And then we're going to press the seam toward the E rectangle unit. That also means it's pressing the seam towards that C triangle right in the center there. But that means that we have a beautiful 1/4 inch seam allowance left on each of the heart points. So let's go ahead and do that again with all the units. I'm giving it a little shot of steam to relax the fibers, and now I'm going to press them the way that they need to go. Yes, that's perfect. Now don't worry about any wonkiness left over because we'll be trimming these down to beautiful blocks that measure 11.5 inches unfinished. Last one, we're just going to give it a good press. Make sure that it's pressed really well. All right, now we'll go back to the sewing machine and add the B triangles, and then we'll be done with the stitching. We just have the B triangles left to add. So start with one of your B triangles, and we're going to add it to the right side of the heart, or the D rectangle units. We're going to put it right sides together, and we're going to again just leave a little bit of that 1/4 inch just hanging over the edge here, because that's your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we'll be sure and leave that seam allowance at the end so that your block won't have a lopped off point at the bottom of your heart. So once you do that, let's go ahead and sew that into place. And perfect. Now we want to make sure that we do that for all of the units, and we will press the seams out toward the B big background triangles. We'll press that seam that way, and then we'll be able to add the other side. We'll add that last triangle, and we'll get those sewn on, and everything is pressed. Now, the last thing we have to do is press these seams on that last B triangle, and then our blocks will be constructed. They're still going to look a little weird because we have to trim off some edges. So let's go ahead and get these all pressed flat and pretty. I will tell you that once you get the hang of making these woven hearts blocks, they're very fun to make. If you only have 15 minutes to sew, you can whip yourself up a block or two, and you can make a whole quilt with these. And I actually have a pattern on my website made of all woven hearts blocks. Now that we're done, we're going to move to the cutting table, and I'm going to show you how to true up these blocks to be 11.5 inches unfinished. Now we want our blocks to be really pretty and look like squares with hearts. And that's what I have here. But right now we've got all this excess, so we need to trim these down. They will be 11.5 inches unfinished. I recommend, if you have a 12.5 inch ruler, to use that for truing up. But if all you have is your precision precuts ruler, you can use that in conjunction with the lines on your mat to get this trued up. Now don't worry, these blocks will be just fine in the quilt. So if they're not exactly perfect, not to worry, because we're going to be sewing spacer strips of background fabric, and no one will ever know. But I think you're going to find it's pretty easy to do once you get the hang of it. One more thing, I just want to give you a little advice from the voice of experience. Never try to true up your blocks after 9 p.m. because trust me, that's when mistakes will happen. You're tired, you're not thinking clearly. Wait until you have good daylight and you feel refreshed. So I have my block laid out here, and I've got it kind of lined up with the lines on my mat, but I'm going to take my 12.5 inch ruler and lay it down and kind of line it up. What we're looking for right now is to make sure we have at least 11.5 inches from the right side to the left side, and we're also making sure that we have a 1/4 inch clearance beyond the points underneath the ruler, meaning you're not going to cut anything too close to these points right here. We need to make sure we're cutting a 1/4 inch beyond those points. And so we're not really trimming off a whole lot, but we are trimming off some. Now here we go. I think that's pretty good. And mostly we're trying to get the dog ears off. So we're going to go up the right side, and without moving the ruler, we're going to go across the top, getting rid of any of the schmutz or anything that's left over. But you see, I was able to save the 1/4 inch seam allowance beyond those heart points. Now we're going to go ahead and rotate the block and line it up with the 1/2 inch marks on my mat, or you can do the inch marks, either way. And we're going to go ahead and lay the ruler back down, and now I'm aligning the 11.5 inch marks on the ruler with the sides that I've just trimmed, and that way I know that anything that is left over will be trimmed off. Just like that. There you go. That's how you do it. Easy peasy, right? Now we have a beautiful heart block that measures 11.5 inches, and now all we have to do are the other heart blocks. So now we have our 3 woven hearts blocks all finished, all squared up, and ready to be put into the quilt. We still have a lot more blocks to make, and next month, in month 3, we'll be tackling easy fusible machine applique. It's going to be really fun. We're totally switching gears next month. But I hope you've had fun with this piecing, and I hope you're enjoying the messages of the word prints of UpWords. That's my line that I designed to be uplifting, and I hope you're finding it fun to work with these bright, saturated, clear prints with those uplifting messages. Thank you for joining me. I am so honored to be doing this for Janome, and thrilled that you're joining me for the 3rd block of the month that I've done for Janome. So I'll see you in month 3, and we're going to have a lot of fun. Bye-bye.